Hello, Jonathan Hedderly here, and today I'm going to be discussing the psychological themes found in the Netflix original film, To All the Boys I've Loved Before. Psych Cinema is Shrink Tank's video series where I explore the psychology found in the films that I watch and love. But before we get started, do me a favor, subscribe to our channel and click on the notification bell. That way you'll never miss when we drop new video content exploring the intersection of psychology and pop culture. So today we're going to be talking about the Netflix original film To All the Boys I've Loved Before, based on the young adult novel by Jenny Han. You might be wondering why a middle-aged dude is going to be talking about this film. Well, I have a number of reasons. First and foremost, I think it's a great film. It's very charming, it's very engaging. The actors are very likable, they're very human, and in a lot of ways, everybody can relate to some of that awkward, anxious feelings about early romance and teenage love. So the movie itself stands on its own. But more importantly, there's a lot that I love about this film about its representation. The main character of the film, Lara Jean, is played by actress Lana Condor, who is of Vietnamese descent. I always have to say that slowly because if I say it too quickly, I say Vietnamese, and we know that's not right. But Lana Condor is of Vietnamese descent, but she was adopted and raised by white parents. And as a child of adoption, I can certainly understand and empathize with how she brings that nuance into both her character and her own backstory. Because in the film, her parents, she has a Korean mother who has since died, and a white father played by actor John Corbett. And so that's one way that I can really resonate with the film. But another is that as a Korean, adopted Korean, I also married a Caucasian woman, and we have two daughters of mixed ethnicity. And so I really appreciate the representation of the sisters in this film that clearly have Asian ethnicity, but their ethnicity and their culture is not the primary purpose of the film. It's really simply a part of who they are as they navigate those tumultuous teen years. The basic premise of the film is Lara Jean, the middle sister, when she was growing up, she would write love letters to all of her crushes and first loves, but she'd keep them to herself. And they inevitably get out to the boys that they were written about, and then you just sort of see some of the chaos that ensues. And most of the movie focuses specifically on the boy Peter, her 7th grade crush, who now is dating her former best friend Genevieve. But during the film, they break up, and Peter and Lara Jean decide to fake a romance and a relationship to make Genevieve jealous. And that really opens up for Lara Jean expressing and exploring true feelings in the present versus sort of her crushes from when she was younger. And it kind of awakens her up to new possibilities as she's getting older and dealing with all types of change in her life. Again, the film is very charming. It reminds me a lot of the 80s John Hughes types of movies, except without the blatant Asian racism.
Oh, no more Yankee, my wanky. The donga need food.
So let's dive into the psychology found in the film. And a spoiler warning, I am going to be talking about the film, so if you haven't seen it, pause this video, go watch To All the Boys I've Loved Before, and then come back and listen to my thoughts about the psychology and let me know whether you agree or disagree, or if you picked up on some of these themes throughout the film. Another disclosure, I have not read the books, so I'm only going to be talking exclusively about the films. And I want to talk about a number of themes that kind of the film and the characters sort of explore, such as anxiety and dealing with change, fear of failure and risk-taking, concepts like empathy, or even expressing yourself in a private manner. And then finally, looking at the role of family and sisterhood that the film, and I'm pretty sure the books, really lean in on. But let's first talk about anxiety and difficulty with change, because that really encapsulates a lot of Lara Jean. And we get that in very outward, specific ways, and we see that subtly in a number of ways. She's the middle child. Her oldest sister, Margaret, is about to go away to school in Scotland, leaving Lara Jean as the oldest sister and kind of the caretaker of her younger sister, Kitty. We see early on that Margaret really is the responsible one. She's the one that's checking in on her sisters. They've all kind of collectively taken on a role of mothering and parenting each other as they deal with the aftermath of the death of their mom. But Marga going away leaves Lara Jean kind of in sort of a state of influx. And we see that in a number of small, subtle ways. Getting into car accidents, trying to overparent her younger sister who really rebels and lashes out at her. And we see that loss that she's experiencing once again with her sister going away, something that she had to deal with on a much more profound manner with the death of her mother. And so you see Lara Jean is a very kind of timid person. And because of that, when her letters get out to the 5 boys that she had crushes on or loved during her life, it really leads to a big tailspin, because Lara Jean, for the most part, lives kind of isolated with really one really close friend, and then in some ways in like a dreamlight or fantasy world. And this really causes her to step outside of her shell and to take risks. There's a lot about Lara Jean about fear of failure and a lot of anxiety. But we know that risk-taking, good risk-taking, helps us challenge our own anxiety, and the more that you step outside of your comfort zone, the more in psychology we call desensitization happens, to where that threat, that negative anticipation, or that dread decreases the more that becomes the new normal. And that really is spurred into her life by the character of Peter, her 7th grade crush. He's kind of like the big time jock, the lacrosse goalie. He's very charming. He might borderline on overly confident or arrogant, but he's got a lot of positive traits. And he approaches Lara Jean about a proposal of how to be in a fake relationship to get his ex-girlfriend Genevieve jealous. Now, Genevieve was best friends with Lara Jean until the 7th grade party where they were playing spin the bottle and her crush Peter kissed Lara Jean, and inevitably Genevieve broke the relationship with Lara Jean. Something Lara Jean really wasn't aware of until later on in the film. But back to Peter. So Peter proposes, well, let's have a fake relationship, which Lara Jean's never had a real relationship. So even having a fake one really is not something that she can really relate to. She has no semblance of what a high school relationship's like. And she and Peter actually sit down and they write out kind of a contract. What are the rules and what's permissible, what's not? All of this is very much out of Lara Jean's character. But throughout the film, you start to see this fake relationship really open her up because she is pushing herself outside of her comfort zone. And her siblings and her teacher and even her friend and others start to see a side of Lara Jean that's not as closed off and timid and anxious and fearful. And again, that really applies in psychology that we know. With anxiety, there's this desire to avoid and to retreat. But by doing so, we really give more power to that anxiety and that fear. So the more we take risks, the more that we step outside of our comfort zone, the greater we have of an opportunity to become more desensitized and to really reinforce that message back to us that we are perfectly capable of facing our fears. And more often than not, our fears are more magnified in our mind than they are in real life. So she starts this fake relationship with Peter. And this relationship, and even the love letters that she had written to herself and kept closely hidden, they really represent this theme that we're seeing in today's culture about the fabricated or idealized self of reality versus the authentic self. Because Lara Jean has no idea what to do as a girlfriend. She has no idea how to respond to Peter's efforts at affection and how to read whether they're authentic or they're just part of the role that he's playing. And in some ways, it's really kind of sweet that the audience picks up before Lara Jean does that Peter's actually starting to really fall for her, and he really is into her. But in her mind, she has no ability to see that. She still thinks that all of his gestures, all of his words are performance. And we see this a lot in today's culture with social media and the advent of creating this very fabricated or highlight version of yourself versus really having a strong sense of our authentic identity and our values and what we're really about. Because through social media, whether it be Instagram, Snapchat, or other Snapchat, I bit my tongue, that was my Snapchat. We see this fabricated self through social media and how young people are using it today. We also see it with a lot of older people and how they are using social media as a way for validation and how they can selectively filter what they want people to see and how they want to present themselves. And for Lara Jean in this relationship, but even her letters, that taps into that idea of the fabricated self. Her love letters are really not authentic anymore. They are a snapshot, almost like a diary entry of her feelings in a particular time and place, and they haven't had the opportunity to evolve and grow. And so when the letters get out, that's part of the dilemma that she finds herself in, is that these were written several years ago. She may not have some of those same feelings for these people, but they don't have that context, and they naturally respond to getting a letter where Lara Jean is just gushing over her love for them. But when you think about Peter in that relationship and the awkwardness that ensues about, she doesn't know how to read his gestures of affection. She doesn't know what to make of his warmth, his engagement, his curiosity. She's not sure whether it's part of the performance or whether he's falling for her. Now, we as the audience pick up much earlier than Lara Jean does that Peter starts to fall for her, and he starts to make more and more of an effort in a very subtle and indirect way that he does like her and that he is attracted to her. Kind of, like we would expect teenagers to do. Not very direct, because that's the most vulnerable way that you can do that, but in small gestures that she doesn't pick up on, such as saving her a seat on the bus to the trip that they're going to. Small things like that Lara Jean doesn't know, because she's often kind of an isolated fantasy version of romance. She doesn't have any experience of what it's like to navigate this with a real life person. The other thing about the fabricated self is, versus the authentic self, is the idea of writing a love letter. Or people used to write in diaries. Maybe they still do, I assume, but most often now people tend to write on social media, and that's really where they externalize their thoughts and their feelings. And that really has created some disruption of having sort of a safe kind of outlet and safe space to really process your thoughts and feelings without there being ramifications of who hears about it or what to make of it. A lot of parents nowadays, they get on their kids because of what they might post on social media, and they view it as either inappropriate or they take it too literally. If a kid says, I hate my parents, I'm gonna run away, or my life sucks. And people don't necessarily know how to read into that, whereas like writing letters, or in the past when people would write in diaries or journals, they'd have a safe place to externalize raw emotion without taking it literally or assume that it was automatically true. In the same way that we read Lara Jean's letters and we know that they're a snapshot at a different time. They're not how she truly feels right now. And in fact, as the movie begins, her feelings probably are mostly aligned with her next door neighbor, who is the ex-boyfriend of her sister Margaret. And so you even see how she starts out thinking that she's attracted to one boy, but through real life relationship and interaction, she discovers that she really has stronger feelings or just feelings in general with Peter. And so that idea of like risk-taking, the authentic self, experiencing life versus sort of a fantasy version really opens up Lara Jean to become more of who she is and what she's really about at this teenage years. So what is one of the primary things that attracts Lara Jean to Peter? Well, you could argue that he's very charming, he's attractive, he's very popular and likable, and he is all those things. But you see through most of the film that she acknowledges that, and she realizes that's probably why she had a crush on him to begin with, but that hasn't really translated into ongoing longing or strong feelings for Peter. It's actually only when they both kind of pause and open up and show true vulnerability that you start to recognize that maybe these two are meant for each other. And it happens in a diner scene where Lara Jean actually talks a lot about the loss and the hole in her life from the death of her mother. And she has an opportunity to really talk about that, something she doesn't talk about a lot, she acknowledges. And Peter talks about his father. His father has left the family. He has a new family now, a new wife, new kids, and he's talking about that absence and the mixed emotions that come with that. On the one hand, he loves his father and he misses him. On the other hand, there's a lot of anger that he has for the decisions his father has made to break up the family. And it's through that vulnerability that really Peter and Lara Jean, I think that's the foundation of their attraction and connection. And that really is at the heart of what empathy is. Empathy of that ability to relate to another person's situation and experiences, literally by being able to step into their shoes. And for Lara Jean and for Peter, they really haven't found that in another person. Like Peter even comments on how his ex-girlfriend, Genevieve, doesn't open up like that to her. He doesn't talk about these things, but there's something about Lara Jean and her ability to relate and understand that allows him to let his guard down and open himself up. And then you start to picture him more than just sort of the charming, likable, attractive jock that he could easily be written off as. Finally, I want to talk about the role of grief and its impact on the family, because the film doesn't kind of sideswipe that. It really looks into it, but in a very nuanced way, because that's not the focus of the film. But you see how the sisters, they take care of each other. You see how they've all taken on some roles of parentifying and chipping in the absence of their mom, sometimes to the detriment. Like the youngest daughter, Kitty, doesn't want to be parented by her older sisters, and she is kind of the fireball that kind of pushes them away. And we know through the film that she's really the reason that these letters even get out to the boys. But Margaret has taken on kind of a caretaking role, which when she leaves for school, that kind of disrupts the whole family system. Lara Jean, she really opens up about missing her mom and that loss and wondering about her mom and what it would be like. Probably one of the most tender moments in the film with the father is when she's sitting at that same diner that Lara Jean and Peter were at, and he talks about how her mom, when they were together, would go to that same diner and play songs and get up and dance around the diner. And so you see that there's this loss and there's this grief, but it really has actually compelled the family to step up and to rely on each other more, rather than it be something that tears them apart or that they have to endure individually without each other's love and support. And that really is something that I really want to commend the film and the book on, because a lot of times we assume that grief and loss has to be this all-consuming trauma that really prevents somebody's life from having greater meaning and purpose. And what we know is that there is something that's called post-traumatic growth, where sometimes people go through trauma or loss, and it actually opens up and draws out of them greater meaning and purpose, such as family and not taking relationships for granted. And so I think the film does a very poignant job of showing the very real loss and absence of Lara Jean's mom, but also showing how this family has found a way to not only endure and carry on, but how to lean on each other through that. Well, that's going to do it for my analysis of To All the Boys I've Loved Before. What did you think of the film? Leave me a comment and let me know your thoughts, or drop me a recommendation of a film you'd like to see me analyze here on Psych Cinema. Like this video, or if you don't, just troll us, comment, let me know about all the boys you've hated before. I don't know, but we'd love to hear from you. Or you can leave a recommendation of a film you'd like for us to analyze here on Psych Cinema. Be sure to follow me on Twitter, and also check out Shrink Tank, our website with articles, videos, polls, and more that explore the intersection of pop culture and psychology. That's going to do it for today. Until next time, my name's Jonathan Herrle. Thanks for watching.